Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a place that isn't exactly the stuff of fairy tales, though it's one you've probably imagined before. You're standing inside a royal chamber, its walls hung with rich velvet drapes, the smell of beeswax candles heavy in the air, and somewhere beneath all that fragrance, the sour metallic scent of sweat and blood. A queen is about to give birth, and if you think her crown makes this any easier, you're in for a shock. Royal births were public spectacles, grueling tests of endurance and dangerous enough that you probably wouldn't survive one yourself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the weight of the moment before you even see her. The queen lies on a bed so large it swallows her frame, her face pale under a layer of powder, meant to hide the signs of strain. Outside the heavy oak door, the court murmurs nobles and clergy waiting for news of the royal heir. In this world, the birth of a child isn't a private family moment. It's a matter of state, of dynasty, of power. Her pain is political currency, and you standing there can't help but notice the room is hot and airless. The only ventilation, a narrow arrow-slit window through which you catch a hint of cold, damp air from the courtyard below. Midwives move with quiet urgency, their linen aprons already stained. They've done this before, hundreds of times, but never for a woman who holds the fate of a kingdom in her womb. A physician hovers at the edge of the bed, though his role is more symbolic than practical. His presence assures the watching nobility that learned medicine is here, even if it can do little more than observe. The real work falls to the women at the queen's side, women who understand the rhythm of childbirth in ways no medical text could describe. The queen grips the carved wooden handles fixed to the bed frame, her knuckles whitening. She's not allowed to scream too loudly. Royal dignity must be maintained, but her breath comes fast, shallow, betraying the truth her powdered face tries to conceal. She's been in labor for hours already, and no one will dare tell her how many more remain. Every contraction tightens her body like a fist, every moment a reminder that this is as close as she will ever come to death without crossing over. In the corner, a cradle stands ready, draped in embroidered silk. It's a hopeful symbol, a promise that all this suffering will end with the soft cry of a newborn. But in the minds of everyone here, there's an unspoken truth. Many royal cradles remain empty. Childbirth in this age is a gamble with terrible odds, even for queens, especially for queens. You take in the ritual of it, the beeswax candles, the whispered prayers to saints for safe delivery, the silver cup of watered wine to steady her nerves. Outside, church bells are silent waiting. No news will leave this chamber until it is over. It's not just the baby's life at stake, but the queen's, the succession, the very stability of the realm. The wrong outcome here could mean war. The queen's ladies-in-waiting hover near the foot of the bed, fanning her, blotting her forehead with damp cloths. One reads quietly from a psalter, her voice almost drowned out by the queen's labored breathing. The scent of lavender oil is strong in the air, meant to mask less pleasant odors. A brazier glows red in the corner, keeping the chill of the stone walls at bay. You can feel the heat building in the room, mingling with the tension. Another contraction hits harder this time, and the queen gasps despite herself. The midwife leans in, murmuring encouragement, reminding her to breathe. There's no anesthesia here, No real way to dull the pain. A draught of herbal infusion might be offered, but it's as likely to make her nauseous as to bring relief. This is endurance pure and unfiltered, the body forced through an ancient primal trial. Your gaze flicks again to the cradle, and you realize something in this moment. Every person in the room is thinking about the same thing, whether the child will be a boy. Royal births are not only about life and death, they are about producing an heir. A daughter might bring alliances, but a son brings security to the throne. That unspoken pressure sits on the queen as heavily as her labor pains. She knows the truth: fail to produce a male heir, and her place in the royal bed could be given to another. The minutes stretch like hours. The queen's face is wet now, her hair damp despite the pins and jewels. The midwife checks her progress, nods to her assistants, and the quiet hum of the room changes pitch. It's time to push. A priest steps forward to bless the moment, his voice low, resonant, carrying over the sound of the queen's groans. Someone places a cool cloth at her neck. You can almost feel the shift in the air, anticipation, fear, and something like reverence. Every birth is a threshold, but this one carries the weight of crowns and treaties and centuries of lineage. The queen gathers herself, draws in a breath, and bears down again. The midwife murmurs approval. The room holds its breath. Outside the door, guards stand stiff at attention, ready to carry the news through the palace. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, the city waits its people, oblivious to the fact that the course of their lives might be changing in this very moment. Inside, the queen's world narrows to pain and effort. Each push a battle, each breath a victory. And as the candle flames flicker against the velvet walls, you realize you're witnessing something both deeply human and utterly alien: a royal birth stripped of the romance of fairy tales, raw and perilous, where every cry from the bed could be the prelude to a kingdom's triumph or its grief. And this is only the beginning. The queen's hands are trembling now, her fingers slick with sweat as they clutch the bed handles. Her breath comes in ragged gasps, each one ending in a low moan. She tries to swallow before it escapes her lips. A lady-in-waiting leans close, whispering something meant to give strength, though her voice trembles too. In this room, no one is untouched by fear. The midwife's voice cuts through it all, steady, commanding, practiced. She kneels at the foot of the bed, her hands deft, her eyes sharp in the dim candlelight. Her instructions are simple: breathe, push, rest, push again. It sounds easy in words, but each command is like asking the queen to climb a mountain with no air in her lungs. Every muscle in her body burns. Her face contorts in pain, but she keeps going. The chamber is crowded but silent except for the rhythm of labor. A wet cloth is pressed to the queen's forehead, another to her chest. The herbal draught is offered again, and this time she sips it sharp and bitter, with a hint of mint that fails to disguise the earthy taste. It settles in her stomach like a stone, but she needs something, anything, to keep her strength. You glance toward the far corner where the physician lingers, his black robe a dark shadow in the candlelight. He holds a satchel of tools, though you suspect they will remain unused unless something goes terribly wrong. He is here for ceremony as much as care. The real expertise belongs to the women who have attended dozens of births in cramped cottages and cold keeps. Still, his presence is a reassurance to the courtiers outside, proof that the queen's delivery is under the watchful eye of science, or what passes for it in this age. Outside the chamber, muffled footsteps pass by, followed by a sudden hush. The palace knows something is happening. Messengers hover near the great hall, ready to ride with news the moment it's confirmed. Across the city, the streets are quiet, their usual clamor subdued by the winter chill. But here in this room, the heat is suffocating. Another contraction builds, and the queen grits her teeth, her eyes squeezing shut. The midwife urges her on, her voice rising slightly, as she instructs the assistants to prepare. One places fresh linen sheets, another lays out the swaddling cloth embroidered with the royal crest. The cradle remains untouched, its silken canopy swaying gently in the candle breeze as if waiting for its rightful occupant. You hear the faint sound of prayers, soft, desperate words spoken under breath by the attendants. It's not just the queen's life they're pleading for, but the survival of a child who might one day hold the fate of a nation. These prayers are old, older than the crown itself, whispered in countless birth chambers before this one. Then comes a cry, not the cry of a newborn, but the sharp, strained sound of a woman reaching the peak of pain. The midwife's hands are busy now, guiding, coaxing, watching for any sign of trouble. Her eyes flick up to meet the queen's, and she gives a quick nod, urging her to push harder. The queen obeys, though her whole body shudders from the effort. Time loses its meaning in these moments. The candles drip wax onto silver holders. The air grows heavier with each breath, and every face in the room leans forward waiting. You realize how much of birth is holding back your own fear, because here there's no guarantee of joy at the end. The queen's head falls back for a moment, her lips parting as she drags in a breath. The midwife says something low, and her ladies quickly respond, lifting the queen slightly, bracing her from behind. The physician steps forward now, not to interfere but to witness. His eyes narrow as he studies her, as though he could measure her strength by the set of her jaw. Another contraction surges. The queen clenches her jaw, her voice breaking as she pushes again. The midwife leans closer, her own breath quickening. Something is happening, progress, but slow, painful progress. The attendants ready cloths, their movements quick and precise. And then just for a moment, you see the queen's eyes, their wide, glistening, filled with something more than pain resolve. This is not just for herself, but for the child, for the lineage, for every royal who came before, and every one who will come after. Her body is the vessel through which history will pass tonight. The air in the chamber is thick now, the scent of lavender oil mingled with sweat and something metallic. It clings to your clothes, to your skin. Every sound is magnified, the queen's breathing, the rustle of skirts, the faint hiss of the brazier. Outside the door, a lone guard shifts his weight, the creak of armor startling in the stillness. The midwife gives another sharp command. The queen braces herself, takes one deep breath, and bears down with all she has left. A collective tension grips the room, every gaze fixed on the moment between agony and arrival. And though you can't yet see the outcome, you feel the weight of it pressing into your chest. Because here in this small, stifling chamber, the fate of an empire is balanced on the edge of a breath. And no one, not even the queen herself, knows which way it will fall. The chamber feels smaller now, as if the walls themselves are leaning inward, closing in on the bed where the queen labors. Her face is flushed, strands of hair clinging to her damp temples. She looks both impossibly fragile and unyieldingly strong, a figure caught between the vulnerability of pain and the sheer will to endure it. The midwife crouches low, her hands poised, her eyes flicking between the queen and the life she's coaxing into the world. The women assisting her move with quiet precision, exchanging quick glances and nods that pass for entire conversations. A bowl of warm water is brought closer, steam curling in the candlelight, ready for whatever comes next. Another contraction racks the queen's body, and she cries out, despite herself, a sharp, almost startled sound that makes one of her ladies-in-waiting flinch. The midwife's voice cuts through the air again, steady and firm, urging her on. There's no turning back now. Every push carries the possibility of resolution, but also the risk of disaster. Your eyes are drawn again to the physician in his dark robe, who now stands at the foot of the bed beside the midwife. His expression is unreadable, but his hands rest on the satchel at his side. You can't help but wonder what lies within forceps of crude design, small knives, cord for ligatures. Tools meant to save life, but just as capable of ending it if used too late or too soon. The queen's breathing becomes rhythmic, almost mechanical, as she obeys the instructions given to her. Push, breathe, push again. Sweat beads on her upper lip and runs down the side of her neck, soaking the fine lace collar that had been carefully arranged hours ago. That lace is ruined now, but no one cares. Appearances have given way to survival. You catch sight of a rosary in the hands of one of the older attendants, her lips moving soundlessly as she works. The beads click softly between her fingers, a metronome of faith against the relentless tempo of the birth. The midwife glances up at the queen's face, reading something there. Pain, yes, but also a flicker of surrender to the process. She murmurs encouragement, her tone almost soothing now, like a lullaby for someone on the brink of collapse. The queen's eyelids flutter closed for a heartbeat, as though she's gathering herself in the darkness behind them. Outside, the air is cold enough to bite frost, tracing the edges of the arrow-slit windows. Inside, the heat is oppressive. The brazier's glow seems almost sinister now, the shadows it throws long and twisting across the stone floor. The scent in the room grows sharper, a blend of iron and lavender sweat and tallow. It is not a smell you will forget. The midwife's hands move quickly now, her assistants leaning in to help. There is a shift in the energy, a low murmur passing between them that makes the physician straighten. You lean forward, though you are not sure what you expect to see. And then it happens, just a glimpse at first, but unmistakable, the beginning of a new life. The queen gasps, her hands clamping down on the wooden handles. The midwife's voice rises, urging her to give one last desperate push. The air in the room feels suspended, as though every breath is waiting for the sound that will follow. And then there it is. A thin, wet cry, fragile but fierce, cutting through the heavy silence. It's the kind of sound that makes shoulders sag with relief and eyes brim with sudden tears. The midwife lifts the child swaddled quickly in the waiting cloth and holds it up just enough for the physician and the gathered attendants to see. "It's a boy," someone whispers. The words are almost swallowed by the chamber's stillness, but they ripple through the air like a spark on dry tinder. A boy. The room exhales as one, the weight of uncertainty easing, if only for a moment. Outside, the bells will soon ring, and word will fly through the palace like wildfire. The queen's head falls back against the pillows, her eyes glassy with exhaustion. She is pale now, her lips tinged with a bluish hue, but her chest rises and falls with deep, shuddering breaths. Her body trembles in the aftermath, the shock of pain giving way to the numb relief of completion. The child's cries grow louder as the midwife inspects him, her hands gentle but deliberate. She wraps him in the royal swaddling, the crest embroidered in gold thread, catching the candlelight. The cradle untouched until now is finally approached, though the queen insists on holding him first. Her arms, though weak, reach for the bundle, and when the child is placed in them, her whole expression changes. It is not joy alone, it's something more complicated, a mixture of triumph, exhaustion, and the knowledge that she has just secured her place in the history of this realm. The boy's tiny fingers curl around nothing, his eyes blinking in the dim light. The physician steps back satisfied and murmurs something to the midwife. She nods, already turning her attention to the queen again. The danger is not over. Many women are lost, not in the birth itself, but in the hours after. But for now, the room allows itself a breath, a fleeting taste of victory. And as you stand there watching this fragile scene unfold, the queen cradling her newborn, under the flickering candlelight, you realize that while the politics and pressures may belong to the royal court, the moment itself is as old and as human as time. Yet for royal mothers, it comes with a crown's worth of weight pressing down on their shoulders, even here in the quiet after the storm. The quiet after the birth is almost unnatural. The room, which had been filled with the rhythm of pain and whispered commands, now hums with a low, steady murmur. The baby's cries have softened to intermittent whimpers, the sound oddly small against the weight of the moment. The queen lies still, clutching her child, as if the entire world might try to take him away. The midwife moves with brisk efficiency, directing her assistants to clean away the soiled linens. Blood-darkened sheets are whisked into a waiting basket, replaced by fresh cloths that smell faintly of lye soap. The floor beneath the bed is carefully mopped with warm water. No one will speak of how much blood there was. It's the kind of truth that stays locked in this chamber. The physician hovers nearby, watching the queen's face for signs of danger. He knows the risks that still linger: fever, hemorrhage, weakness that could settle into something far worse. Royal births do not end when the child is delivered. They simply shift into another kind of waiting. The midwife checks the queen's pulse, the warmth of her skin, the steadiness of her breathing. Her eyes narrow at a hint of pallor, but she says nothing yet. Attendants move to the cradle, laying out the embroidered bedding with care. The baby will sleep there soon, though for now he remains in his mother's arms. A thin line of sweat glistens on the queen's temple, and when she speaks, her voice is barely a whisper. One of her ladies bends low to catch the words, nodding quickly before disappearing toward the door. A message will be sent to the king. The chamber door stays closed, but the sounds beyond it are changing footsteps, pacing, the occasional muffled voice, the metallic jingle of armor as guards shift their stance. They're waiting for confirmation, and when they get it, the news will spread through the palace like wind through a field of dry wheat. Inside, the queen leans her head back against the pillows. Her eyes close, but her arms do not loosen around her child. You can almost see the unspoken thoughts crossing her mind, the relief of producing a male heir, the fear of losing him to the countless dangers of infancy, the knowledge that this is only the first of many trials. One of the older attendants, her back slightly stooped, approaches the bed and murmurs a blessing in a voice so soft it's almost part of the air itself. She has served in the palace long enough to have witnessed many such scenes, and her eyes carry the weight of them all. Her hands brush lightly over the queen's, as if lending strength through touch alone. The midwife, her hands still stained, steps to the brazier to wash. She scrubs with a rough cloth dipped in steaming water, the scent of rosemary leaves rising from the bowl. She has seen both miracles and tragedies in rooms like this. Tonight, she's grateful for the miracle, but she doesn't let it soften her vigilance. Her gaze flicks to the queen every few moments, as if daring her body to betray them. The baby stirs his tiny face, scrunching into a cry that seems far too loud for his son. The queen shushes him gently, rocking him in small, slow movements. His hair is damp and dark, his skin slightly mottled from the strain of birth. He is perfect in the way only a newborn can be fragile, wrinkled, and entirely unprepared for the life that awaits him. The sound of hurried steps outside makes the guard at the door shift. There's a knock, soft, almost deferential, and the midwife nods to one of the attendants to answer it. A court herald stands there, eyes wide with urgency, but he does not enter. He waits as the midwife crosses the room with the child lifting him so the herald can see. It is a ceremonial acknowledgement. The heir exists alive and breathing. The herald bows deeply before hurrying away. In moments, the bells will begin to ring, first from the palace chapel, then from the city's great cathedral. The people will know their queen has given them a son. The queen watches the midwife return with the child, her eyes following every step. She accepts him back with a look that is part longing, part exhaustion. Around her, the attendants tidy the room, extinguishing one or two candles, now that the most urgent work is done. The shadows grow deeper in the corners, the light softer and warmer. But you can feel the undertone, the danger hasn't passed. The queen's breathing is steady, but her lips are pale, her eyelids heavy. The midwife offers her a cup of watered wine, pressing her to drink, and then begins preparing an herbal poultice to encourage healing. She works quickly with the quiet determination of someone who knows that even a small delay could shift the balance from life toward death. The baby, unaware of the weight his first breath has carried, drifts into sleep against his mother's chest. Outside, the bells begin their slow, deliberate toll, each peal sending ripples through the city beyond the palace walls. And here, in this dim, heavy-scented room, the queen holds her child tighter, as if she already knows that both of them will need every ounce of strength to face what lies ahead. Because in the world of royal mothers, a safe birth is never the end of the story. It's only the first chapter in a life where survival is never guaranteed, and every breath feels borrowed from fate. The bells outside do not stop. They ring in long, measured strokes, echoing across the palace courtyards and spilling over the city's rooftops. Somewhere beyond the stone walls, people are already gathering in the streets, craning their necks toward the sound. For them, it is a celebration, a royal heir, a secure dynasty, perhaps even a feast to come. But inside the chamber, the sound is a distant, almost hollow chorus. Here the air is still thick with the memory of strain. The queen lies half-reclined now, her head supported by embroidered pillows, the baby nestled in her arms. The midwife moves between her and the brazier, adjusting the herbal compresses that rest against her abdomen. Each press of the poultice draws a faint wince from the queen, though she says nothing. She is pale, her lips almost colorless, but her eyes remain open, fixed on her son's face, as if memorizing it in case she doesn't wake. The physician finally steps closer to the bed, placing 2 fingers against the queen's wrist. He counts silently, his lips pressed into a thin line. He nods once, almost imperceptibly, and murmurs something to the midwife. She responds with a look that is neither relief nor alarm, just acknowledgement. In her experience, even the smallest sign of stability must be treated as a temporary gift. The chamber smells of rosemary and lavender, now the sharper scent of blood, fading but not gone. One of the younger attendants replaces the water in the basins, carrying them carefully so as not to spill onto the rush-covered floor. She glances at the queen with wide eyes, as though seeing both majesty and mortality for the first time. Outside, the bells shift into a quicker rhythm, their joyful cadence meant for the people, not for those in this room. Inside, the mood is tempered, measured. The attendants speak in low voices, their movements efficient but gentle. They are not celebrating, not yet. They know too well that the hours after birth are treacherous. The queen closes her eyes for a moment, her breathing shallow. The midwife leans in, whispering something that sounds like a reminder to stay awake. One of her ladies-in-waiting slips an arm behind her shoulders, helping her sip from the silver goblet. The wine is warm now, sweetened with honey, to coax her into taking more. In the corner, the cradle waits, its silk canopy glowing faintly in the candlelight. The baby will be placed there soon, swaddled in the cloth bearing the royal crest. But for now, he remains against his mother's chest, his tiny breaths almost inaudible beneath the rise and fall of her own. His head turns slightly, seeking warmth, and the queen's lips brush his forehead in a gesture so small it could be missed by anyone not watching closely. A quiet knock sounds at the door. The guard opens it just enough to admit a single figure, the king's herald, his face flushed from haste. He kneels before the queen, offering formal congratulations and relaying the king's words of pride. The queen's eyes open at the sound of her husband's name, but she does not speak. Her nod is slow, deliberate, as if acknowledging both the honor and the weight of what she has just accomplished. The herald retreats, the door closing softly behind him. The room exhales again. The midwife returns to her work, her hands steady as she adjusts the queen's bedding, replacing damp linens with fresh ones warmed near the brazier. She moves the pillows slightly, supporting the queen's posture to ease her breathing. Every action is purposeful, every touch meant to guard against unseen dangers. The older attendant resumes her place near the head of the bed, fingers wrapped around the worn beads of her rosary. Her prayers are quieter now, but no less fervent. The rhythm of the beads clicking between her fingers is almost hypnotic, matching the cadence of the queen's breathing. You notice the way the shadows shift in the room. The candles are burning lower, their flames steady in the still air. The brazier's glow softens, casting a deep, steady warmth. It is the kind of warmth that can lull a body towards sleep, but the midwife knows rest too soon could be dangerous. She keeps the queen talking, asking gentle questions, even if the answers are little more than whispered words. The baby stirs again, his small mouth opening in a silent yawn. His eyes flutter beneath delicate lids, and for the first time you realize how utterly unaware he is of the storm he has just entered. His world is a patch of warmth, the faint rhythm of his mother's heartbeat, the muffled sound of voices above him. He knows nothing yet of titles, treaties, or the fragility of life in a royal court. And still, as you watch them, mother and child, you understand that every person in this room is measuring their breaths, waiting for the moment when it is truly safe to believe the danger has passed. Because here, in the dim heart of the palace, the most precious life in the kingdom rests in arms that are still trembling from the fight to bring it into the world. The bells outside fade into the distance, replaced by the muffled sounds of celebration beginning in the courtyards below. Somewhere a trumpet announces the birth to the gathered nobility, but in this chamber no one moves toward the windows to watch. The midwife is focused on the queen, and the queen is focused entirely on the child in her arms. The warmth from the brazier wraps the room like a heavy blanket. You can feel the weight of it on your skin, the way it makes the air thick, slowing every movement. The candles have burned lower, the wax pooling at their bases, the flames wavering slightly as a draft snakes in through the arrow-slit window. A young attendant notices and hurries to pull a velvet curtain across it, sealing in the heat. The queen shifts, slightly wincing. The midwife is there, instantly supporting her and adjusting the pillows. A clean cloth is pressed to her brow, cool with water drawn moments ago from the stone basin. She takes another sip of sweetened wine, the faint taste of honey lingering. It's meant to restore her, but her body is still trembling from exhaustion. The baby makes a small hiccuping sound. The queen looks down, her lips parting in something that almost resembles a smile. She traces a finger along his cheek, marveling at the softness. For a moment there's nothing in her expression but pure, unguarded wonder, the kind that strips away titles and ceremony. In that instant, she is simply a mother meeting her child. The physician speaks quietly to the midwife, suggesting that the baby be weighed and inspected. The midwife agrees, though she waits for the queen's nod before taking him. When the queen hesitates, the midwife leans close and whispers something you can't hear, and the queen finally releases her hold. The attendants carry the infant to a small table covered in warmed cloths. He fusses at the change in temperature, his cries sharper now echoing faintly off the stone walls. The inspection is quick but thorough. The midwife runs her hands gently over his limbs, checks his breathing, examines his tiny fingers and toes. She nods once, satisfied, and wraps him tightly in the swaddling cloth again. The gold embroidery catches the light, a reminder of the life he has been born into, a life where even his blankets bear the mark of power. When he is returned to the queen, her arms close around him instinctively. She exhales as if releasing a breath she didn't know she was holding. The baby settles almost at once, his tiny head tucked against her shoulder. The older attendant with the rosary steps closer, her prayers turning into soft words of blessing spoken directly over the mother and child. She traces the sign of the cross gently over the baby's brow, murmuring for protection from illness and misfortune. In a world where medicine can only do so much, faith is the shield most mothers cling to. The midwife checks the queen again, watching her color, pressing her fingers against the inside of her wrist. She applies another poultice, this one smelling faintly of sage and thyme, meant to encourage her body to recover. The queen barely reacts, her attention fixed entirely on the small weight in her arms. Outside the chamber, the footsteps are heavier now. Servants hurrying back and forth with news preparations, beginning for the formal announcement. There will be proclamations read, church bells rung across the kingdom, and feasts held in honor of the birth. But for now, the queen remains here in the shadowed quiet, separated from all of it by a single heavy door. The baby stirs again, his small mouth seeking. The midwife steps forward, guiding the queen through the first attempts at nursing. It's an awkward, delicate moment, far from the polished image that will be painted for the court's eyes. There's a vulnerability in it, a reminder that even queens must learn the same instincts and skills as any mother. The baby latches, and for a brief moment, the tension in the queen's shoulders eases. She leans back, her eyes closing, a flicker of relief passing over her face. The midwife smiles faintly, though her gaze remains alert. She knows the night is far from over. The candles sputter as one burns down to its base. The scent of wax and herbs mingles with the faint sweetness of honeyed wine. Outside, the celebrations are growing louder, but in here the air is heavy, hushed, and intimate. You can almost feel the heartbeat of the moment, slow, steady, and fragile, as though the entire kingdom is holding its breath alongside this mother and her newborn son. And as you watch, you realize something. The royal birth may have been a matter of politics, ceremony, and power, but here in these hours after, it is simply about survival. Survival for the mother, who has just walked the edge of death, and for the child, who now carries the weight of a crown he cannot yet comprehend. The night deepens outside the palace, though the city remains restless with celebration. You can almost hear it beyond the thick walls, cheers carried faintly on the wind, the occasional crackle of a torch being passed from hand to hand. In the great hall below, candles will be burning late, and wine will be poured into golden cups. But in the Queen's chamber, the pace of life has slowed to something hushed and deliberate, where every sound seems amplified. The baby has finished nursing his tiny body, warm and heavy in the Queen's arms. The midwife takes him gently, wrapping him once more in the embroidered swaddle before placing him into the cradle for the first time. The silk canopy stirs with the faintest movement of air, casting shifting shadows across his sleeping face. For the attendants, this is a small but significant milestone, mother and child, both alive and the heir, finally resting in the place prepared for him. The Queen watches as he has laid down her eyes, following every movement. She seems reluctant to let the space between them grow, but she also understands the ritual of it. The cradle is not only a bed, it is a symbol, a public declaration that the child is well and ready to be presented to the world. Tomorrow the court will see him, and artists will be summoned to record the moment for posterity. Tonight, though, the cradle belongs to the quiet shadows. The midwife turns back to the Queen, pressing her to rest, but rest is complicated in this room. The Queen shifts, trying to find comfort against the pillows, but her body protests, muscles aching, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her like a stone. The attendants adjust the bedding again, tucking the softest cloth against her skin, bringing a warmed blanket from the brazier. A young servant enters silently, carrying a tray of broth and bread. The scent is mild, almost bland, meant to be gentle on the stomach. The Queen takes a few careful sips, though her appetite is gone. It isn't hunger that drives her now. It's the stubborn knowledge that she must keep her strength for what comes next. The older attendant, still fingering her rosary, begins to speak softly of other royal births. She has witnessed stories of queens who recovered quickly and those who did not. Her tone is matter-of-fact, but there's something in her eyes that betrays a deeper care. She pauses often, watching the Queen for any sign of distress. These women have learned that sometimes survival rests on catching the smallest changes before they grow into something deadly. The physician sits nearby, a shadow against the wall. He listens as much as he watches, noting the cadence of the Queen's breathing, the color returning slowly to her cheeks. He has seen many births in his years at court, and he knows this one could still turn. Childbed fever, excessive bleeding, or sudden weakness could steal away the victory they think they have claimed. His presence is not reassurance, it is a constant reminder that death remains just outside the door. The candles have burned low, their light soft and golden, casting halos around the faces in the room. The brazier's heat has mellowed, wrapping the chamber in a steady, gentle warmth. The faint crackle of the embers becomes a kind of heartbeat for the space, slow and steady, unhurried, but alive. In the cradle, the baby shifts in his sleep, making a faint cooing sound. The queen's head turns instantly toward him, her eyes lighting with a brief spark of tenderness. She whispers something, a promise perhaps, or a prayer, but the words are too quiet to catch. Whatever they are, they seem to steady her, and she sinks back against her pillows with a faint sigh. Outside the door, the guards exchange low murmurs. Their shift will be long, but tonight they stand watch not just over the queen, but over the future of the crown itself. Behind them, the corridors of the palace stretch into darkness, interrupted only by the occasional flicker of a torch. It is a world held in suspension, waiting for the dawn. And as the night deepens further, the queen's breathing begins to even out. She is not asleep. Her eyes still drift toward the cradle, but she is resting in the narrow space between exhaustion and vigilance. The midwife sits nearby, her posture relaxed, but her gaze sharp, ready to move at the first sign of change. Here in this fragile stillness, you realize that the danger of childbirth for a royal mother doesn't end with the first cry of her baby. It lingers in the shadows of the night, in the quiet moments when the body is weak and the mind is too tired to fight. The kingdom may be celebrating, but in this chamber, survival is still a matter of the next breath, the next heartbeat, the next hour. The hour is late now, though no one in the queen's chamber dares to fully surrender to sleep. The brazier glows, faintly embers shifting and collapsing, with soft, almost whispered sighs. The candles are fewer, their flames steady but low, each wick a tiny island of gold in the dimness. The shadows between them seem deeper than before, stretching long fingers across the stone floor. The queen lies propped against her pillows, her eyes half closed. She is not truly resting. Her mind is caught between the ache in her body and the sound of her baby's breathing from the cradle. Every rustle of cloth from that corner makes her eyes flick open again, just to reassure herself he is still there, still safe. The midwife keeps her post seated on a low stool not far from the bed. Her hands rest in her lap, but her ears are tuned to every sound. She listens for the queen's breathing, the baby's shifting the tone of the fire. She knows that in the hours just after birth, change can happen quietly and quickly, bleeding that seeps unnoticed, a fever that begins as a shiver. These are the things she has learned to hear before they can be seen. An attendant moves silently to the cradle, adjusting the baby's swaddle so that no draft can slip beneath the silk. The canopy stirs faintly with her movement, and for a moment the embroidered edges catch the light like threads of gold. The baby sighs in his sleep, a soft sound that makes the queen's lips curve almost imperceptibly. Outside the chamber, the palace has not gone quiet. The celebration has grown into something louder, more reckless. You can almost imagine the corridors filled with the scent of spilled wine, the slurred laughter of noblemen congratulating one another, the scrape of boots across marble floors. Somewhere music plays a lute strumming a slow, ornate melody, but it is too far to touch this room. Here, there is only the slow cadence of breathing and the faint hiss of the brazier. The queen shifts again, wincing as she moves. The midwife is there in an instant, helping her to sit a little higher, sliding a warm cushion behind her lower back. She offers another sip of honeyed wine, encouraging her to take it slowly. The queen obeys, her hands steady now, but pale. One of the younger attendants begins to braid the queen's damp hair, fingers working carefully to smooth the strands. It is a small act, but one born of the understanding that comfort sometimes comes in familiar rituals. The queen's eyes close briefly under the gentle pull of the braid, the ache in her shoulders easing just a little. The physician, who has been quiet for some time, approaches the bed once more. He checks her pulse again, his brow furrowing slightly as he counts. He says nothing alarming, but he lingers longer than before, as if memorizing the rhythm for later comparison. Then he moves to the cradle, peering down at the sleeping heir with the same clinical detachment, though even he cannot help a faint nod of satisfaction. The older attendant murmurs a prayer under her breath, the soft click of her rosary beads marking time. It is a constant sound in the background, like the ticking of a clock in a quiet room. For her, the beads are both comfort and shield, an unbroken chain of words that might keep misfortune at bay. The queen opens her eyes again, scanning the faces around her. There is something searching in her gaze, as though she is taking stock not just of her attendants, but of her own place among them. She has done what was demanded, delivered a male heir, but she knows that her worth in the court will be tied to her ability to do it again and again, as many times as the crown requires. The baby stirs in the cradle, his small fists stretching against the swaddle. The attendant, who had adjusted his blankets, leans in, rocking the cradle gently until he settles. The motion is slow, almost hypnotic, and the queen watches it with the faintest smile, though her eyes are shadowed with fatigue. A cool draft slips under the door, brushing against your ankles. It carries with it the faint scent of the night air, damp stone, distant smoke, a trace of winter frost. It is a reminder that beyond these walls, the world continues to turn indifferent to the struggles of this small, candlelit room. And yet within this chamber, time feels suspended. Every movement, every glance, every breath exists in the space between danger and safety. You realize that this is what royal motherhood truly is not. The gilded portraits or the songs sung in the streets, but the long hours in a darkened room where survival is measured in moments, and the weight of the future sleeps in a cradle just a few feet away. The night creeps on, each hour melting into the next, and the air in the queen's chamber grows heavy with the scent of herbs, wax, and the faint metallic tang that clings even after the linens have been changed. The brazier's embers shift and settle with soft pops, sending small bursts of warmth into the stillness. The cradle remains the quiet center of the room, its silk canopy motionless now, the child within sleeping in the deep, untroubled way only the newly born can. The queen's head tilts slightly toward that cradle, even in moments when her eyes seem to drift shut. It is as if her very senses have been rewired to hear, to feel, to notice the smallest change in her child's breath. The instinct is strong, but so is her exhaustion. Her limbs are heavy, her body still aching from the strain, and yet her mind refuses to loosen its grip on consciousness. The midwife notices. She leans closer, her voice a low murmur, encouraging the queen to rest, promising that the child will be watched over. There's a firmness to her tone. It's not just kindness, but a subtle command. She knows that the mother's recovery is as much about strength of spirit as it is about the healing of flesh. One of the younger attendants rises from her stool and moves to the cradle, bending over it with a practiced gentleness. She checks the swaddle smooths the silk beneath the baby's cheek and dips a fingertip into the small basin of warm water to moisten the child's lips. He stirs faintly but doesn't wake. The attendant's movements are efficient but tender, shaped by the knowledge that this infant is not just a child, but the embodiment of a kingdom's hopes. From outside the chamber, a sound breaks the quiet, a muffled cheer, distant but persistent, like the echo of a storm far away. The celebrations in the great hall are still going strong. Wine is flowing, music is playing, and the king is no doubt receiving the congratulations of every noble eager to align themselves with the new heir. But here, in this candlelit stillness, the mood remains grounded in the practical realities of survival. The physician has taken a chair near the foot of the bed, his posture erect despite the hour. His eyes never stop moving from the queen's face to the cradle to the brazier and back again. It's not just vigilance, it's calculation. He knows that if trouble comes, decisions must be made quickly, and he cannot afford to be caught unprepared. The older attendant sits with her rosary eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. Her face is calm but not relaxed. She has seen too much to believe that peace in the first hours guarantees safety in the next. For her, the night is a battlefield of unseen threats fought with whispered blessings and a constant readiness to act. The queen shifts in bed, and the midwife helps her reposition, slipping an extra pillow behind her shoulders. The queen winces slightly, then exhales her gaze, drifting toward the cradle again. She asks quietly if the child is warm enough. The midwife assures her he is even as she rises to check for herself, brushing her fingertips lightly over the baby's chest to feel the steady rhythm beneath. For a moment, the queen allows her eyes to close. The warmth of the brazier, the softness of the pillows, and the quiet hum of low voices weave together into something that almost feels like safety. But it's a fragile safety, the kind that exists only because a room full of people are keeping it intact. She knows this, and so she doesn't fully surrender to sleep. The baby stirs again, his tiny fists flexing against the swaddle. A faint whimper escapes his lips, and in an instant the queen's eyes open. The midwife reaches the cradle first, rocking it gently until the sound fades. She does not lift him, there's no need yet, but she watches his breathing carefully, counting under her breath. Satisfied, she returns to her seat, though her eyes remain fixed on him for a while longer. The candles flicker their light, catching on the gold embroidery of the swaddle, on the pale sheen of the queen's skin, on the faint lines of weariness around her eyes. In that glow, the scene feels both intimate and monumental, a private struggle with public consequences. And as the hour turns again, the room settles back into its rhythm. The queen, the child, the attendants, the physician, all locked in the same quiet vigil. Outside, the revelry will continue until dawn. Inside, the night's work is still the same, to guard two fragile lives against the darkness that waits just beyond the door. The hours stretch into the cold, pale edge of morning, though the queen's chamber remains in its own cocoon of candlelight and low voices. Beyond the thick walls, the revelry is finally ebbing. Footsteps shuffle more than stride now, the laughter thinner, slurred, winding down to the murmurs of those too tired or too drunk to keep going. Somewhere in the great hall, servants are extinguishing torches, clearing overturned cups, and sweeping up the remnants of celebration. But here the work has never stopped. The queen's face has drawn her skin, almost translucent, in the flicker of the remaining candles. The faint flush of warmth she'd had earlier has faded, replaced by a fragile pallor. Her breathing is steady, but each inhalation seems to carry effort, as though she's still learning how to fill her lungs without the weight of the last hours pressing on them. The midwife hovers close, checking the queen's pulse again, then pressing lightly against her abdomen. Her touch is firm but careful, gauging the body's slow and imperfect return to itself. She glances toward the physician, and their eyes meet in a silent exchange that speaks of caution but not alarm yet. The baby remains in the cradle, swaddled in his silks, his tiny body a pale shape against the darker shadows of the room. He stirs occasionally, shifting his head, letting out small, almost questioning sounds before sinking back into sleep. Every time he moves, at least one set of eyes in the room turns toward him, as if expecting something to go wrong simply because it could. One of the younger attendants slips quietly into the chamber from the corridor beyond. She carries a small pot of fresh herbs, their scent cutting through the heavy mixture of wax and lavender that has settled over the night. She places them near the brazier, the steam lifting the sharp, clean fragrance into the air. The midwife nods approvingly. Fresh air may not be possible, but freshness of any kind is welcome here. The queen's gaze drifts to the cradle again, but her eyes don't hold there long. They travel instead to the door as though she's listening for someone. Perhaps she is waiting for the king. But he does not come. His place is in the public halls where he must be seen, where the politics of a new heir are already being weighed and maneuvered. She knows this, yet the absence still hangs in the air. The older attendant, her rosary still in hand, moves to the queen's side and adjusts the blanket across her chest. She murmurs something too low to catch a comfort, perhaps, or a reminder to rest. The queen gives a faint nod, her lips tightening as though she is holding back a dozen thoughts that have no place in the dim half-light of the chamber. The physician finally breaks the near silence, his voice low and deliberate. He advises the queen to eat more broth bread, perhaps some softened fruit, anything that will give her strength before the fatigue claims her entirely. She agrees, though she takes only a few spoonfuls before setting the bowl aside. The act of eating is more symbolic than nourishing. A pale sliver of morning begins to slip through the arrow-slit window, falling in a thin, cold beam across the floor. The velvet curtain muffles it, but not entirely. The midwife notices and has the curtain drawn tighter. Morning may be coming, but in this room the night is not yet over. The baby wakes briefly, his small cry breaking the steady rhythm of the chamber. The midwife lifts him, placing him gently into the queen's arms. She holds him close, her cheek resting against the downy softness of his head. Her hands are steadier now than they were in the first hours, though. Her arms still tremble faintly under the strain of holding him. She studies his face, his small, closed eyes, his tiny lips, the way his breath comes in delicate, even puffs. For a moment she seems removed from everything else, the pain, the risk, the politics. There is only the weight of him, impossibly light, yet carrying the burden of a dynasty. The midwife waits until the child settles again, before moving him back to the cradle. The queen watches him go, her eyes following, until the silk canopy hides him from full view. Then she leans back, her shoulders sinking into the pillows, her body caught between relief and fatigue. And in that moment, you can see it clearly, the balance she must keep from this day forward. She is not only a mother, she is a queen. Her survival is not merely her own, it is the survival of the crown itself. And as the chamber settles into another fragile stretch of quiet, it's clear that both lives, the woman's and the child's, will be guarded with the same unyielding vigilance as though the entire kingdom exists within the few feet of space between the bed and the cradle. Morning has fully arrived, though in the Queen's chamber, the daylight is kept at bay. The heavy velvet curtains are still drawn, letting in only the faintest glow where the seams fail to meet. It's enough to reveal the outlines of the people inside, the midwife still at her post, the physician sitting rigid in his chair, the attendants moving softly from task to task. The world beyond the palace may be waking, but here the room remains suspended in that fragile space between night's danger and morning's demands. The Queen's body aches in ways she had no name for before last night. Every muscle seems to resist movement. Her bones feel heavier, and the deep soreness at her core is a constant reminder of the ordeal she's endured. She shifts slightly against her pillows, wincing at the pull in her abdomen. The midwife notices immediately and is there in seconds, adjusting her position, placing another warmed cushion beneath her lower back. The baby stirs in the cradle, a small, restless sigh escaping his lips. One of the attendants moves to him, checking his swaddle, her fingers quick but gentle. The Queen's eyes are on them instantly. She watches closely until the attendant steps back, reassured by the steady rise and fall of his tiny chest. It's clear she's not ready to let even the smallest movement go unwatched. Outside the chamber, a knock sounds on the door, not hurried but deliberate. The guard answers to admit a messenger bearing a silver tray. On it rests a small scroll tied with red silk and the royal seal pressed into wax. The midwife takes it, passing it to the Queen without breaking her pace. The Queen's fingers are slow as she unties the ribbon, her movements careful. The message is short. The king sends his praise, his gratitude, and a promise to visit once court matters are settled. She reads it without expression, then folds the parchment neatly and sets it aside. It's a formality, a gesture meant to be polite and public, though it's delivered in the privacy of this room. The physician rises, moving to the cradle. He studies the child, noting his color, the steadiness of his breathing. His inspection is wordless, but the faint nod he gives the midwife afterward is enough to ease a fraction of the tension in the room. A tray of fresh broth and warm bread is brought in for the Queen. She accepts the spoon from one of her ladies-in-waiting, eating in slow, measured bites. The food is plain, meant to be easy to digest, but the act of eating is as much a test as it is nourishment. Every spoonful swallowed without discomfort is a small victory. The older attendant with the rosary moves to the cradle and leans over it, whispering prayers under her breath. She's been doing this at intervals since the birth, as though weaving a net of protection around the infant with her words. The others in the room do not interrupt. This is as much a part of the care as the physician's checks or the midwife's herbs. A faint cry comes from the baby, sharper this time, pulling every eye toward the cradle. The midwife lifts him, checking him quickly before bringing him to the Queen. The moment he is in her arms, the tension in his small body softens, his cry tapering into a soft whimper. She holds him close, rocking gently, her lips moving with what might be a lullaby, or simply the rhythm of her own breathing. The candle flames tremble slightly as a draft slips under the door. It carries with it a faint scent of the outside world, cool air tinged with damp stone, and the distant echo of church bells marking the hour. Those bells will be ringing for him today, calling the faithful to give thanks for the heir's safe arrival. But in here the sound is just another reminder that the kingdom's eyes are already turning toward the child, weighing his future before he can even open his own eyes to see the world. The Queen strokes a finger along the curve of his cheek, watching, as he turns his head toward her touch. Her face softens in that moment, all the formal dignity of the crown slipping away. There's a quiet there, the kind of silence that doesn't need filling a mother and child bound in the simplest form of love, even within the most complicated of lives. The midwife waits until the baby has settled before returning him to the cradle. The queen lets him go reluctantly, her gaze lingering. Her hands remain folded in her lap, afterward fingers interlaced, as though holding on to something unseen. The morning will bring visitors soon, nobles eager to be the first to see the heir clergy sent to bless him, scribes ready to record every detail. But for now, the queen still has these last hours, where the chamber remains a closed world, guarded against intrusion, where she can exist not as a queen, but simply as the woman who survived the night and brought this child into it. The day outside the queen's chamber begins in earnest. You can hear it faint but distinct, the shuffle of hurried steps in the corridors, the low hum of voices preparing for something important, the clink of silver platters being carried toward the great hall. The palace is shaking off the remnants of last night's revelry, polishing itself for the first act of the newborn heir's public life. But here, inside the dim, guarded quiet of the queen's room, the hours still move differently. The curtains remain drawn tight, the candlelight mellow and steady. The air is warm from the brazier, fragrant with rosemary lavender, and the faint sweetness of the bread that was set beside the queen but barely touched. The queen reclines against her pillows, her posture composed, but not comfortable. She cradles the baby again, his weight light in her arms, his face turned toward her chest. His tiny mouth opens and closes in soft, instinctive movements, his breathing slow and even. She studies him with the same quiet focus she has shown since the first moment she held him, as though each detail, every eyelash, every tiny fold in his skin must be committed to memory. The midwife kneels beside her, checking the queen's pulse, pressing her fingers gently along her wrist, then moving to feel the warmth of her skin at the temple. She nods, satisfied for now, though her gaze still lingers, as if she knows that safety is a matter of hours and days, not moments. She shifts to the baby, checking the tightness of the swaddle, the softness of his breathing. Each check is quiet, unobtrusive, but thorough. Outside the door, a pair of voices speak in low tones. The king's chamberlain is here. He wishes to announce the first visitors, the bishop, the high steward, and 2 noblewomen of the queen's household. The midwife glances at the queen for permission, but the queen delays answering. Her lips pressed together not in refusal, but in measured consideration. The birth was only last night. She is still pale, her body still heavy with exhaustion, and yet she knows the court will not wait forever. Finally, she nods once and the midwife signals to the guards. The visitors will be admitted in an hour. It will take that long to prepare her fresh linen's hair, smoothed the pale signs of strain, softened with a touch of powder. The attendants begin moving more quickly now, their steps hushed but purposeful. One opens a carved chest to retrieve the robe chosen for this moment, its fabric heavy with embroidery, its colors deep and regal. The queen does not hand the baby to anyone yet. She keeps him with her as the attendants begin their work. Her hair is unpinned and combed carefully, each tangle eased free without pulling. Her face is washed with warm water, scented faintly with rose. She endures the process without complaint, though her gaze drifts often to the cradle as though measuring the distance in her mind should she need to rise and cross it. The older attendant with the rosary remains in her place, the beads slipping between her fingers, the soft whisper of her prayers threading through the room like a quiet chant. She glances toward the queen from time to time, her eyes full of both concern and pride. She has seen queens falter under less, but she also knows that the next hours will require a different kind of endurance. The baby stirs his small cry, rising like a thread of silver in the stillness. The queen shifts instantly, cradling him closer, rocking slightly. She hums a sound so soft it could be mistaken for her own breathing, and the child quiets. The midwife watches from a step away, her expression unreadable, but her hands busy preparing the small cloths and herbs she will keep close during the visitor's time in the room. The palace beyond these walls is already buzzing, words spreading from servant to noble. The air is alive and well, the queen recovering. Couriers will soon carry the news to distant provinces, and in the marketplaces of the capital, hawkers will call it out between the selling of bread and cloth. Yet in this chamber the air remains thick with the truth that no proclamation can change. The queen is still healing. The child is still fragile, and everything they have gained in the last 12 hours could still be lost in the next. The hourglass on the small table marks the slow fall of sand. When the last grain drops, the first knock will come the beginning of the day's pageantry. But for now, in these final moments before the world enters the room, the queen sits in silence with her child, a private figure holding the public future in her arms. And in the candlelit stillness, you understand that this, more than the feasts, more than the processions, is the heart of royal motherhood, the quiet, the watchfulness, the sense that even when surrounded by attendants and bound by duty, a mother and her newborn still occupy a world entirely their own for as long as that world can last. The hourglass runs out its final grains, falling into the lower bulb with a muted hiss. A knock follows almost immediately, measured, deliberate, the sound of people trained never to rush in the presence of royalty. The midwife rises first, giving a subtle glance to the queen, who adjusts her grip on the child. The attendants already prepared stand poised along the edges of the room, their posture perfect, their eyes lowered. The door opens just enough to admit the first wave of visitors. The bishop enters first, his robes a deep crimson edged with gold, the heavy scent of incense clinging to the fabric. Behind him comes the high steward, his every step careful, precise, as though each movement carries the weight of protocol. Two noble women of the queen's household follow their dresses, rustling softly, heads inclined in deference. They pause just inside the threshold, waiting for the midwife's nod before approaching the bed. This is no casual visit. Every gesture, every breath in this moment is part of a ritual older than the walls of the palace itself. Their purpose is not merely to offer congratulations, but to witness, to confirm with their own eyes that the heir is indeed living whole and legitimate. The queen sits slightly more upright now, her embroidered robe arranged to catch the light. Its rich colors, a subtle statement of resilience. The child lies in her arms, still swaddled in the gold-threaded cloth, his tiny features relaxed in sleep. She does not rise, no one would expect her to, but her presence is commanding nonetheless. The bishop approaches first, bowing deeply before offering a blessing. His voice is low but clear, the ancient words filling the chamber with a solemn rhythm. He traces the sign of the cross over the child's forehead, then over the queen, his fingers steady despite his age. The scent of incense grows stronger in the small space, mixing with the ever-present herbs and candle wax. The high steward follows, offering formal words on behalf of the court. His speech is polished, practiced praise for the Queen's courage, thanks for the safe delivery assurances that the news has already spread throughout the realm. The noblewomen speak next, their voices soft, their words laced with carefully measured warmth. They praise the child's features, his tiny hands, the delicate curve of his mouth, drawing polite smiles from the attendants. Throughout it all, the Queen holds her composure. She answers with nods, occasional words, her voice calm and even. But her hands never loosen on the child, and her eyes flick often toward the midwife, a silent understanding passing between them. This visit is a formality, but it is also an intrusion into the most vulnerable hours of her life. When the words are spoken and the bows exchanged, the visitors step back. The bishop offers a final blessing, his hand lingering in the air above the child's head as though sealing the moment. Then, with the same measured pace in which they entered, they retreat toward the door. The high steward casts one last glance at the Queen, part respect, part calculation, before stepping out. The door closes and the room exhales. The midwife moves at once to the Queen's side, checking her color, her breathing, the tension in her shoulders. The Queen leans back, her robe settling around her like a protective mantle. She allows the attendants to adjust the pillows again, but she does not let go of the baby. Outside, the shuffle of feet and the murmur of voices continue. More visitors will come, though perhaps not until later in the day. The court will want to see the heir, to fix his image in their minds, to begin weaving his existence into their alliances and ambitions. But for now, the Queen has reclaimed a brief, precious moment of privacy. The midwife offers her a sip of warm broth, and she takes it without protest. The older attendant resumes her prayers, her voice softer now, almost blending with the faint crackle of the brazier. The baby shifts in the Queen's arms, making a small sound that draws a faint smile from her lips. And as the chamber settles again into quiet, you can feel the unspoken truth pressing in from all sides. The outside world may celebrate the arrival of an heir, but inside these walls, the work of keeping him and his mother alive has only just begun. The hours after the visitor's departure bring a quieter rhythm, though it is not the kind of rest the Queen's body craves. The chamber remains dim, the curtains still drawn, the candles replaced as their wicks burn low. Attendants move in careful patterns, replenishing basins with warm water, refreshing the herbs in the brazier folding, and refolding linens so everything remains ready at a moment's notice. The Queen reclines with the baby once more, the gold-threaded swaddle, a bright contrast against the muted colors of the bedclothes. His eyes are closed, his breathing soft though now, and then he stirs and curls his fingers into tiny fists. Each time the Queen adjusts him with instinctive gentleness, her gaze fixed wholly on him as though nothing else in the world exists. The midwife keeps her distance unless needed, though her attention never wavers. She knows that the danger after childbirth often hides in plain sight, bleeding that starts subtly, a fever that rises without warning. She studies the Queen's color, the slope of her shoulders, the pace of her breathing. Her own body is still, but her mind ticks like a clock, counting the hours and the signs. A young attendant slips in with a small silver tray. Upon it is a cup of warm milk infused with crushed almonds and honey, a nourishing drink meant to restore strength. The Queen takes it slowly, pausing between sips to shift the baby's weight against her arm. When the cup is empty, the attendant takes it away in silence, glancing once at the child before disappearing through the door. Outside, the sounds of the palace are more subdued now. The earlier bustle has softened to a steady hum, footsteps moving at a measured pace, voices lowered out of respect for the mother and child. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of a lute drifts faintly through the stone halls, a slow, courtly melody that doesn't quite reach this room. The physician returns briefly, his presence a shadow at the edge of the bed. He checks the queen's pulse and the baby's color, exchanging a quiet word with the midwife before departing again. He moves like a man who knows he will be summoned often in the coming days, but for now finds no immediate cause for alarm. The older attendant sits nearby, still with her rosary, her voice a quiet murmur of prayers. She has been through this enough times to understand that the hours after birth can be the most deceptive, when everyone believes the worst is over, and yet the body is still walking a fine line. Her prayers are steady, her eyes half closed, but she misses nothing. The queen leans her head back against the pillows, closing her eyes for a brief moment. Her breathing slows her shoulders, easing just slightly, as if she might finally yield to rest. But the baby stirs again, a soft cry breaking the stillness. She opens her eyes at once, adjusting him, until he quiets the moment of rest, lost but not resented. The midwife approaches, offering to settle the child in the cradle for a while, but the queen shakes her head. For now she keeps him in her arms, his warmth pressed against her, as if the closeness itself is part of her recovery. She strokes his cheek with the back of her finger, her lips curving in a faint private smile. As the day edges toward evening, the light in the room grows warmer, the candle flames steady and low. The brazier glows with a quiet heat, the scent of herbs lingering in the air. The outside world, its politics, its demands, its expectations, remains locked beyond the heavy wooden door. Inside, there is only the queen, her child, and the quiet vigilance of those sworn to keep them alive. It is a fragile peace, one held together by constant watchfulness, and the understanding that neither crown nor cradle offers protection against the most human of dangers. Yet in this moment, with her child's head resting against her heart, the queen allows herself to believe that for tonight, at least, they are safe. Evening has returned to the queen's chamber, though the hours have blurred into one another, marked only by the slow replacement of candles and the careful tending of the brazier. The air is still warm and fragrant, heavy with the mingled scents of rosemary beeswax and the faint sweetness of honey from the drinks she has been coaxed to take. The light is gentler now, flickering against the rich folds of the curtains, turning the shadows long and soft. The queen lies reclined, the baby resting in the crook of her arm. His breathing is deep, steady, his tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Her eyes trace his face, every delicate line and curve pausing on the faint movements his dreams bring to his lips. It is the kind of gaze that holds both awe and vigilance, as though she cannot stop looking for proof that he is still here, still safe. The midwife sits close by her posture, relaxed, but her mind still alert. She has seen 100 births, but she knows that complacency is the enemy in these first days. Every few minutes, she glances at the queen's face, the subtle color in her cheeks, the strength in her grip on the child. So far, the signs are good. Still, she will not leave until another watch takes her place. The older attendant's rosary rests idle in her lap, now her prayers whispered only occasionally. Even she seems to sense that this evening is holding itself together in a rare stillness. The younger attendants move more quietly than before, their steps softened as they change linens, replenish the basins, and replace the folded cloths near the bed. Outside, the palace has quieted to a near hush. The echoes of the day's celebrations have faded into the occasional creak of the great doors, the distant tread of a guard making his round. Somewhere far off, the low toll of the chapel bell marks the hour, its sound deep and slow, as though reminding the palace that time still moves even in the midst of joy and caution. The queen's gaze shifts from the child to the cradle, but she does not move to lay him there. Tonight he will remain with her, his warmth pressed against her chest, his breath syncing with her own. She leans her head back into the pillows, the weight of the crown, though not physically present, momentarily lighter in the quiet. This is the close of her first full day as both mother and monarch, a day in which she has crossed from the peril of labor into the delicate balance of recovery. The politics will wait. The ceremonies will come, but for now the chamber holds only the quiet heartbeat of survival and the shared warmth of two lives bound together by blood duty and something far older than the crown. The candles burn low, their light fading into soft pools that barely touch the far corners of the room. The brazier's glow has dimmed its embers, a deep pulsing red radiating the last of their heat into the still air. Outside the thick walls, the palace sleeps, guards pacing in measured steps, the kitchen's empty, save for a single low fire, the grand hall silent after its day of noise. In the queen's chamber, everything moves more slowly now. The attendants have settled into their stations for the night, their movements reduced to quiet adjustments of blankets, soft checks of the child, and the occasional glance toward the midwife for assurance. The older attendant's rosary rests quietly in her lap, her prayers finished for now, though her gaze lingers on the sleeping mother and child. The queen's breathing is steady, her face calmer than it has been since the birth began. In her arms, the heir sleeps without stirring. His tiny hands relaxed his features, softened into the untroubled peace that only a newborn can hold. She bends her head slightly, pressing a kiss to the top of his head, her eyes closing as if to hold the moment in place. The quiet is not empty. It is layered with presence. The midwife's watchful eyes, the subtle warmth of the brazier, the faint scent of herbs still drifting in the air. This is not the grandeur the world will see in portraits or ceremonies, but the truth beneath it. A mother holding her child in the soft space between danger and dawn. Somewhere the first hint of morning will come again. But for now, the queen's world is this warm, still, and close with the sound of her baby's breathing, the only measure of time that matters.